Hi, I'm Heather from here booktubes, and today is books I almost DNF'd and adored. Now, I'm a DNF queen. I quit on books like nobody's business. I do not finish things that are not a requirement for my life that I am not enjoying. But I'm doing it for fun, and it's not fun, I don't keep doing it. That being said, sometimes I am aware of the fact that it's either not the right time for that book or that I would probably enjoy it, but I'm just not sure about finishing it. So there are lots of books that I DNF because the quality's not there. It's clearly not my style. There's something that I don't like, either a character or a plot device or a trope that I'm just not going to enjoy reading it. So I don't finish the book. There are times where quitting too early can be disappointing, right? There are some books where, yes, the beginning is slow, or there's a lull, or there's a weird thing 30% through. But if you finish it, if you finish the book, that book actually does have greatness in it. And of course, reviews really help with this, but ultimately you don't know until you read the book. And I'm not willing to bet that on every book because most of them aren't like that. These are ones that I seriously thought about DNFing at some point in the book, and then I gave it 5 stars. So my first two are actually not adult romances, although they do have a romance subplot. So the first one is The Cruel Prince, which is the Folk of the Air trilogy by Holly Black. This is a very popular young adult fantasy series, and it starts out... Okay, let me explain to you why I like this book and trilogy. It takes place in the Fae land, and I love the Fae. You know this, I'm sure, if you've watched multiple of my videos. But Jude, our main character, is fully human. She has a sister who is half Fae, and because of that, she and both of her sisters, her human twin and her Fae half-sister, are taken to the Fae lands as children. But the Fae in this world are the traditional type of Fae where they are cruel and they are tricksters and they cannot lie, but they view humans as pets and toys. And if the toy gets broken and or killed, it's just not a big deal to them. And I like this book because Jude just stays a regular old human the entire time. She's not secretly the long-lost princess. She doesn't get any magical powers. She doesn't suddenly become the object of a fairy godmother or get magical powers from a mating bond or any of the things. She just stays human. She uses her humanity to beat the Fae at their own games, and I find that fascinating. However, the beginning of this book does very much feel like a YA high school bully drama, and there was a bullying scene pretty early on, and I was just like, this is just not what I want. I want Fae and court and intrigue and plots and assassinations. I want these types of things, and this feels just like a high school drama set in the Fae land. So I seriously considered DNFing it. And that would have been such a huge mistake because by about the 50% mark, things start going different ways. She starts becoming much more involved in the court, and she's a spy, and she's just trying to find out these secrets and do these missions and not get caught. And she has a hate to love hating. There's a lot of hating and bullying with the prince, and it was so good. And it changes tone in a way that I think does make sense. It doesn't feel like the beginning of the book or the rest of the book, they don't belong together. They make sense, but there is a definite turning point where we get a different flavor almost, and I love it. The next one is The Thief from the Queen's Thief series by Whalen Turner. This is a 6-book series that is one of my favorite series of all time, and I almost DNF'd the first book. So in the first book, we have a thief, and he claims that he can steal anything, and he's been in the king's prison for a minute. Well, he's taken out of the king's prison to do a mission to steal a valuable item from a neighboring country. And so we're following this group. It's 2 men and 3 boys, and they are traveling to go steal this item. And that's the whole book. That's the whole book. There's some really great mythology in here, great world building, and if you go back and reread it, there's so many subtle little things. And she has a dry, witty humor that is just so great. And you really care about all the characters also, but you are just watching this group of guys go on this journey. And it's a short book. This is not like dragged out or anything. But at the same time, I was like, as a child, when I started reading it, I was like, where's the romance? Is something going to happen? Is anything going to happen? I am not sure about this. However, my sister had told me that it was a great book and that I should read it. And I was stuck in a car on a road trip, and this was like 20 years before I started reading ebooks. So I didn't really have any other books packed, or I had already finished it or something like that. I remember it was my only option, and I wasn't going to sit there and do nothing. I was going to read a book, and so I read the book. And the great thing about this series is that the endings are amazing. The endings are huge plot twists, and there's always reveals that you couldn't see coming, and it's so endlessly entertaining. The majority of the book, you're not really sure what's going on, but it's done so well. It's done so well. I can't explain to you the writing style. It feels like you're learning nothing, and yet also it's entertaining you, and then you get to it and you're like, wow. All these things were foreshadowing or make so much sense now. Jen is our main character, and I love him. We get his perspective for I think the first 2 books, and then every book after that is from a different character's perspective. And each one only has one book that is mainly from their perspective, and it's very interesting. There is a romance, there's just not a romance in the first book. My next one is The House on the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I started reading this for a readathon. I got maybe 25-30% through, and then the readathon was over and I wasn't really feeling it. It wasn't heavily romantic or smutty or any of the things, but I knew I wanted to continue it. So I did temporarily stop, and I have to tell you, I often don't pick them back up. I do not DNF with the intention of going back to it the majority of the time, but sometimes I do, and this was one where I did intend on going back to it. And then there was another readathon and it fit the prompt, and so I picked it up again, and it's just so delightful. His writing is so beautiful, and there's so much depth. There's so many quotable things in his books, and so much humor and happiness, and just I really enjoy his writing. It's very flowery. It's just pretentious enough. Have you guys seen that gif? But no, it's so good. So it's about a middle-aged man. It's basically a caseworker for magical children who are put in orphanages. And he does such a fantastic job of pointing out the problems with the system that doesn't exist, right? We don't have magical children, but pointing out the problems with the system that are easily transferable to our world and our country. Probably whatever country you're in, to be perfectly honest with you. And he does such a good job of pointing out that being ignorant and not knowing to do better, even maybe when you've been told that you need to do better, doesn't necessarily make you a bad person, and that there is hope for you to have your eyes truly opened and to see where you were wrong, and to admit that you were wrong and to do better. So he's this caseworker, and he gets called up by extremely upper management to go and check out this specific orphanage with the most dangerous magical children around. And so he does, and he has a romance with the caretaker. This is a male-male romance written by an Own Voices author. He's delightful. I follow him on Twitter. And the children are so fun. They're so fun. He did such a great job. None of them are your kind of standard paranormal. They're also interesting and sweet and clever, and I felt like somebody who is around kids a lot. I felt like the things that these kids did, while obviously influenced by their magical abilities and their species, were things that children do. I thought he did a really good job with that. And the romance was so slow and it was so sweet, and there's no smut at all. And the romance is not the most prevalent part of the story, but it was just a lovely, lovely part of it. And I just really, really enjoyed it. Now, I don't have any plans on reading Wolfsong because it's sad. It sounds so emotional and I don't want to do it. But this book is just, it's a delight. That's all I've got for you. It is a delight. Then I have Auntie Up, which is High Stakes #1 by Christina C. Jones. I almost DNF'd this book, even though I love Christina C. Jones. But I think I was about 30% in, and there was this part that stressed me out so much. I was just like, oh no, we're gonna have this conflict for like the next 40 to 50% of the book. Like, she's not gonna tell him about it, and she's gonna be hiding it, and it's going to be this whole thing. So I stopped. But I never marked it as DNF. I would just had it kind of sitting there, and I was like, just give me a minute. Let me read some other books. And I did, and then I came back to it a week or two later, started reading, and it was resolved like 2 pages. It only took like 2 pages afterwards, and she had completely fixed it, and like the love interest knew about it and everything. And I was just like, oh, so you weren't gonna do this to me? You weren't gonna stress me out for 50%? If I had literally read like 3 more pages, I would have been fine. That happened. So this is it's a black love romance, and it is a casino owner. His family owns the casinos, and he has this fling, kind of. He has a one-night stand with this girl who is one of his waitresses and is an excellent poker, maybe, player. But she doesn't know that he's the boss, and he doesn't know that she's an employee. So it's fantastic. He can't get her out of his head, even though he doesn't do repeats. He has trauma from a past relationship, and she doesn't really do repeats either. So she also has her own trauma from a past relationship. So there are some content warnings for domestic abuse and loss of a loved one. Then they cross paths again, and they're not hitting it off. They are butting heads. It's their story, and it's great. This kind of leans toward romantic suspense. There's definitely some suspense elements and some violence and criminal elements, if that makes sense to you. So there is that. It was a little grittier, a little darker than a lot of Christina C. Jones. And like I said, it stressed me out there for a minute, but so good. So well done. Doesn't get too dark, at least not for me. If you have enjoyed other of my recommendations, then this is probably within your comfort zone as well. They definitely butted heads, but they also were pretty good to each other the whole time, even when they were pulling shenanigans. So I loved it. Lastly, I have The Magic of Discovery, which is Emerald Lake's #1 by Britt Andrews. This is a reverse harem witch romance, and she is a green witch, and the guys are on a mission that they lie to her about. They, meet her on the mission, and we know this as the reader, and 2 of the guys have a relationship with each other, although it's almost friends with benefits, and they will all end up having a relationship with her. And there are things happening. I found the twists in the plot pretty predictable, to be honest. But the smut in this book, I was about to DNF. I was just like, I just don't know. It's a debut novel, and there were some things I was like, I don't know. And then 30% in, the first sex scene happened, and I was like, all right, okay, this is worth reading. I'm going to continue. And it was so hot. It was greatness. I have not yet continued, and like I said, the plot was a little bit predictable, but I liked the characters, and the smut was top tier. So if you want a paranormal reverse harem with a witch and a bunch of guys who are very good at what they do, but you're not exactly sure what they're up to, it was greatness. That's all the ones that came to mind really easily that I remember almost DNFing them and then ended up truly just loving them. What's a book that you thought about DNFing and you continued and you are just so grateful because you loved it. Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.